welcome to Pay It Forward. I've got a really quick and easy little project for you all today, a new little pattern in my Kawaii series. Now Kawaii actually means cute in Japanese, so I think this one fits the bill and fits in nicely with the others in my series. So it's very simple to make, and this is a little mama bear. She could, I guess it could be a papa bear too, we don't want to leave out the dads, with a teeny tiny little baby there. Very simple to make up. I haven't gone out and bought any special fabrics for this one. I'm waiting on fabric for other projects, so I thought I'd sneak this little one in for you all. I'm sure you'll love it. Great for gifts as well. So all you need to do is click on that link. It's in the description box below. There's a link in there for your free pattern templates, and all you need to do is open that up and you can print those out on your home printer. Now make sure when you do that you set your printer in the settings, set it to print at actual size, so that it doesn't resize, and your pattern templates will be absolutely perfect. So let's get busy making little mama bear. So let's get started on our little mama bear or papa bear, and I've just made mine out of just normal quilting cotton. So I've got my front and back pieces, and I have those interfaced with my favourite fusible woven cotton interfacing, and that gives us a nice strong little finish there. It does need to be quite strong. We do pack this quite firm, so make sure that you do interface that one. You're also going to need a little base for your little mama bear, and I just cut that one in felt with that same interfacing on the bottom, and you can see there, that's how we put that little base on. It's just a lovely finish. And we're going to need something for her little arms. Now you can actually, I've cut my arms in the same fabric like I have with this little one, but you can of course use a different fabric if you really want those arms to stand out. You might have something in the same color story that still blends but still stands out just a little. So I've gone very tonal with these two, obviously going for the pretty pinks with this one. So we've got our little arm pieces, and we've just got the two pairs there. They also have the interfacing applied. We're going to need the little face pieces, and that is a little piece, muzzle piece is cut from felt. That has heat and bond applied to the back, and we will be fusing that one to the front. And then you've got your little nose piece, which is also cut from felt with the heat and bond applied to the back. Now I've given you two different nose styles. So we've got this one here with that very square little look that we cover with stitches, and this one I'm going to be showing you just a softer, rounder little nose. Totally up to you what you decide to do, which one you use, but I just thought it'd be nice for you to have those little options. I like to pull the little ears in with a couple of little buttons. It's just a really simple way to give it some shape and also just add a little bit more detail. You can see I'm going for slightly bigger ones this time than I did before, but they will fit nicely. I've also slightly shortened those ears since transferring the pattern, so you'll see that difference there. So they will go on there. You'll also need, for your little arms, we're just going to have a little filler of felt inside each arm. So you just need some felt with some heat and bond applied to the back to cut those two little opposite arm pieces. It just gives them a bit of substance, and sort of almost like, it's like a little bit of wadding in there. So, and then we have our little bear. So our little baby bear, I'm just gonna pull him from mama's arms there. So you can see very simply made, and made up very easily, but just sits over her little arms so beautifully. So we've got the main body piece, and the little arm pieces are just cut from double felt. Now double felt is simply two pieces of felt joined together with heat and bond, and then the pieces are cut from that. So it's a solid piece. As you can see here, it's quite thick, and we don't need to do anything else to it. We're just going to be stitching around the edge, and it's a great little fabric to make up and use. I've actually got a video that shows you how to put double felt together, and I will put that link up there for you so you can check that out, and it talks to you about preparing your felt for sewing as well. So We also need, so we've got our little arm pieces, our body pieces from double felt. Our little head pieces are just cut from felt with that same cotton interfacing behind. So we need those two head pieces. We need our little muzzle piece for our face, and that is also felt with heat and bond, and that one will be fused on in place there. Also for our mama bear, she needs eyes. So I'm just using little black buttons that are appropriate, and don't make them too big. This style does need small little eyes. You can even go smaller than this. You could use safety eyes if you like. I like the little buttons on these projects. I just think it gives it a little homely look. And I will be adding mine after we've assembled the bear so that I get a bit of pull in. So I'm going to be showing you how to do that. So we also need, for the base of our little bear, to keep our little bear standing upright and nice and stable, we need to put in a hard cardboard base. Now if you have a wooden disc of the right size, that would be great, but I've just used 2 pieces of mat board, Framer's mat board, which I get from my local picture framer. He keeps all his offcuts for me, and I've just cut 2 pieces and I've glued them together. So that is as strong as a wooden disc now. So you definitely need that one. You've got your template there for that one. We're going to need some little snap fasteners. It's just the little old-fashioned snap fasteners. I've used the larger ones here, and that's how Mama Bear can hold her little baby. And of course you can make, you know, more than one baby, because she's got big broad arms, this mama. She can handle a couple of babies in there, so you could put one either side. You can imagine making this for an expectant mum. It'd just be a beautiful gift. And somebody with twins, you could make the 2 of them. So I'm sure you'll have a million ideas. So we're also going to need some pearl thread for our embroidery, and our extra strong thread for, I'm going to use it for embroidery and construction. It will be helpful if you have a wool felting needle. You can buy these on eBay, and usually in packs of sort of 4 or 5. So you want a heavy duty one. That helps us pack our polyester filling in, which we will be filling this bear completely with. I haven't added any weight to this one, and I don't feel that it needs it. And we have our medium-sized doll needle for adding our little eyes if you're going to put them on that way. Also some clear craft glue, and that is just for gluing our disc into place on the bottom. Just something that's suitable for fabric will be perfect. Something nice and quick drying. So let's get started on the very first thing. Move everything out the way. Oh, baby can go back in there. Pop in there. You can also choose whichever side you wish to have that little baby, and you can have the hands cross over differently if you like. So we're going to start with our little arm pieces. So we've got our 2 sets of arms there, and on the back of each one of them, in each pair, we're going to add our little filler piece, which acts like a little piece of wadding. Now we want room all the way around that little piece for our seam, for a little seam allowance, and we want a fair bit of room here. So we take it so that it's all the same around the edge here, and there'll be a little bit more excess here, which is perfect because we're going to tuck them into the seams. So first step in this little project is simply to take these to your iron, and with a protective cloth you just press those firmly into place. And once we have those pressed into place, we just take our little arm pieces and we put right sides together with our matching piece, and you can clip them or pin them. Make sure that everything is lined up well. And now we're just going to sew a 4mm seam allowance. We won't be sewing on that felt, it's just this side of that felt. And from the top edge we leave this section open all the way around that little arm up to this edge. Make sure that you're back and forth. We don't need to sew this one 2 times, I usually do, but there's no filling going in here. So just set your machine stitch length to about 2, and then you get a nice tight little stitch. So we just do that on both of those little arm pieces, and then we're going to turn those through and give them a little press. So that has our little arm pieces all turned through, and you can see that I've given them a nice little press. They're nicely rounded and seams all pushed out. And so now we take our back of our little bear, our back piece, and on your back piece transfer your markings from your pattern template, and that shows us where those little arms start. So we can see that there, and we're going to be popping those arms into the seam. So you can see there, I'm just going to line that up, and that's where that begins, and you'll find it'll follow the curve beautifully, and we just clip those into place. Do the same with the other one, the other side, and we're just going to stitch those ones. We're just going to tacking stitch those in on the machine just to hold them in place. So do it just inside your seam allowance, so very close to the edge, just so that they're nicely held into place when we go to join the front to the back. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch both of those on. So you can see there, I've just got those little arms are just tacked into place there on my back body piece. So now we can pop that one aside and we can get started on our body front. So the first thing that we need to do is to remove our backing paper from a little muzzle piece, and we're going to press that one into place, and we need to make sure that that one is from the center top of the head to the top of that little muzzle piece is exactly 3.5 centimeters, or it's just over 1.25 inches. You need enough space there. I know that when you're looking at it flat, it looks like it's very low down, but once that is stitched and filled, it brings that right up. So make sure your best measurement is 3.5 centimeters. So once that's pressed into place, make sure you've got that even each side also. You can choose how you're going to stitch around that little one. And I like to sew a blanket applique stitch for this one. So I'm going to be doing that in a black thread because I want to do an outlining effect, and so I'm going for black. I really want that to stand out. So I'm going to start somewhere at the bottom here. I do have a video that shows you how to sew the blanket applique stitch. I'll put that link up there for you and you can check that out, and I go into great detail with that one. But for now, I've got a knot in the end of my extra strong thread which I'm using for embroidery. And I've come in right on the edge of that little shape there, and I'm going to start my stitches, and I'm going to keep them very small because it's just an outlining thread. Because I'm using black, if I make them too big it will be just too overpowering. So very small little stitches. So I go through both the layers and I come out right on the edge, making sure that I'm taking up some of the underside of that fabric. And we bring our needle out through the loop. And that's our first stitch. Keep our stitches nice and even through both layers, coming out, making sure that I've caught some of that fabric on the underside and through the loop again. And you can see that's going to give me that same little stitch that we have here. You can have a good look at that one. That just settles that one nicely into place. Now if you don't want to be hand stitching this, or maybe you're wanting to speed up this process for perhaps you're making for craft markets or selling online, and you're most welcome to do that with my patterns, to make them and sell them. You can go ahead and sew, you could sew a closed zigzag stitch on the machine, or you could just do a straight stitch. Maybe you've got another decorative stitch on the machine just to make that process just a little bit quicker. But I'm going to go ahead with my blanket applique stitch and work that all the way around that little shape. So there you can see that little muzzle piece stitched in nicely there, and now I've gone ahead and I have pressed into place my little nose piece. And you can see that I've just given it about just over 1 centimetre from the top, same distance from each side, and leave yourself room to be able to stitch in a little smile there. Now this time I've got that one pressed on ready, and I'm going to sew that same little stitch in black all the way around the outside edge of that one. You'll hardly see it, but I just want to seal that little line. Alternatively, you can take it to the machine, speed up the process, sew a little straight stitch around there, or a little zigzag, or you could, if you're using the other template, you can see there that I have just taken my pearl thread and come in from behind, and I've just covered that template with straight stitches, which you can do. You can do it on the curved one as well. It's just easier to follow on the square one. So a few options there for you. I'm just going to go ahead and do that same little stitch around that little nose shape. And there I have my little nose all stitched on nicely, and now we're ready to stitch in our little mouth. Now, just before I do that, remember when you are sewing around with blanket applique stitch any of your shapes like this, do make sure that you rotate your work, because all of your stitches with a blanket applique should always be radiating straight out from your edge so that it's coming out like a starburst. If you don't rotate your work as you go, you'll find that your stitches will start leaning in the direction that you're holding it. And so that's just something to remember, and for your little piece as well. So now we're going to stitch in our little mouth. Now I've taken my very fine marker and I have just drawn in, I don't know if you can see that very clearly there, but just very lightly I've put in a little mouth line. Now I've done a little half crooked smile on mine. I just think that's sweet. You can do a full big smile, you could do a little tiny smile, but I find that something like the little bottom curve of your cotton reel is a good little guide to use to draw that one in. And I'm going to be using my pearl thread, it's an 8-ply, to stitch this one in, and it's a single strand and I've got a knot in the end. So I'm just going to come in from behind there on my first little mark. And I'm going to be sewing this one with a linked back stitch, keeping my stitches nice and small. So that one's my first stitch. So now I'm going to travel a little bit further along that line that I've made, coming from the underneath, and I'm going to go back into that little hole that I came out of, so that those stitches are fully linked. We don't want any spaces between them. Travel along a little bit further, following my little line. And back into that hole. And keep your stitches nice and small so that we don't have any kind of stopping and starting. We want a nice fluid curve. So I'm just going to continue up to that top edge. So that's it for me for the front of my little bear. That's all the work I need to do on her front. So you can at this stage you'll need to add your safety eyes if that's what you're going to be using. Make sure you really measure and check your positioning, because once you fill that bear you can't change it. And the same thing with if you wanted to sew your buttons on now, you could do that, but again you have to be very careful with your measuring. I put them on afterwards because we never know what's going to happen when we start filling. Filling can really change positioning. It doesn't matter how carefully we sew it. So I think it's easier to leave the eyes until our little bear is put together, then we can get that perfect little eye set. Talking about the eyes as well, be very careful about the fabric that you choose for your little bear for this area, because we need the pattern not to be so busy that we can't see the little eyes. So if you have a really busy fabric with really bright, bold things all over it, you might lose that little eye definition. So choose a fabric. It can be nice and tight and printed, just nothing that will interfere with those. So it really does make a difference to the finished result. So now we just need to add our body front to our body back, and that is just as simple as matching up all those edges. You can use clips, so I always use my clips. And make sure that those little arms are nicely incorporated, because that's how they're going to be sewn into the body now. So I will be clipping right the way around that edge. We leave this base open, and now I'm going to get you to increase your seam allowance to about 5 millimeters, which is just under your 1/4 inch. We want a little bit more of a seam allowance because we're incorporating those little arms. So I will start from here and I will stitch all the way around that top edge. Make sure you're back and forth on the start and finish, and I will sew that 2 times for strength. Right, so that has my little bear all stitched up. Now if you've got pinking shears, it's useful to go around that little top edge of all of those curves. You'll get a better curved seam if you do. If you don't have pinking shears, you can just snip into those corners just a little, just with your tiny scissors before we turn it through. And so now that's exactly what we do. We're going to turn this one right side out and we're going to push out all of those little ears. And I'll use my knitting needle to do that. And I may even give him a little press because it's the last time we're going to get to do that. Especially if you're working with cotton, sometimes you can get a few stubborn creases. So I will push all of those little seams out, get those seams rolled out between my fingers, just like that, and I will give him a little press. And that has my little bear all turned through and pressed nicely, so she's all ready for her filling. So I'm using my forceps to fill. It's much easier if you can get a pair of forceps, they're very handy. So I'm just going to take my filling in small pieces and I'm going to first fill out those little ears. And I'm going to make sure that they are packed really firm because I'm going to be pulling them in with those little detailing buttons. But I get those all nice and firm first, and then I will fill out the top curve of the head and then make my way down. Now you need to fill this little one quite firm. You can see that there's not much give in there at all, and it makes it much easier to do the rest of your work if this little character is filled nice and firm. So make your way all the way to the base here, just a little way from the end, and then you can use your wool felting needle as you go to pack that filling in, because it's going to be wanting to jump out at you again. So if you keep packing it in and packing it in with your felting needle, you'll find you get to add more and add more as you go. And while you might feel like it's a tiny little needle, it won't get anywhere, you'll be absolutely shocked what a big help this is when you're filling little animals like this. So I'm going to go ahead, get that packed nice and firm, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I have my little mama bear. She's all packed nice and firm. Don't worry if you've got a bit of creasing in those ears at the top, because we're going to be putting those buttons on. We'll be compressing those down anyway. So you can see there that I have got that packed really nice and firm, and I've gone in there with my wool felting needle and packed that all in. So I've got a nice flat base there. So you can see the effect those needles have. They're an absolute game changer. I definitely recommend that you give them a go. I will never recommend anything to you that I think is not particularly necessary, but this will really help you along. It can be the difference between enjoying making it and not. So I have then gone ahead. Now I've got my doubled thread of extra strong thread on my needle. I've started at the back and I have just sewn a little running stitch all the way around. It's a gathering stitch, come out the other end. I've left my tails hanging so I can tie them off, and I've just done that just about a quarter of an inch in, or about ½ centimetre in from the edge. So now we can take our little disc and we can slip that one in. So you can see that I had to leave enough room to be able to do that. Your little disc will just fit in there beautifully, and it will press those edges out. And we're just going to draw that little one in. I've left my needle on because I will probably go around a second time just to be sure. So you can see there that I'm pulling that one in with that knot, and I only need it to come in this far. It doesn't have to meet up in the middle, and it probably won't. So we tie that one off and we knot that one off at least 4 times, snip those thread ends. So that has that one nicely sealed. Now make sure that you've got that disc really central there. Check it from the front, your little bear is all standing nicely. And then we're just going to add our little base disc, and you can see that I've got that liberally glued up with my clear craft glue there, and I just need to drop that on, center that nicely, and that just gives that little mama bear just a beautiful finish. And we will be stitching that one into place around the base once that's dried. It'll take about 20 minutes to dry. Make sure all those edges are sealed and she can sit there, and then we will come back and do our little stitching. Right, so now we've got this one, took a little while to dry, and it's been 84 years. No, not quite that long. But don't ever rush this. Don't ever try and sew this little circle on while your glue is still wet. It makes it much harder when it's dry. It's a very simple process. So patience with everything. So I'm using a pearl thread to stitch this one on. We're going to be using just a blanket applique stitch. And I have a knot in the end and it's a single strand. This is an 8 ply. I'm using pink just to coordinate. So I've got a knot in the end and I've come in just at the side there under that disc where part of it is just not glued there. And I've just tucked the little knot in there. I don't know if you can see that, but that's tucked in there. And I've just come out right on the edge there. So my first stitch, I'm making mine probably around about 4 millimeters. I go through both of the layers and I make sure that I'm catching some right on that edge there, because we want to bring those two edges together. I do use a long thread because I don't want to run out. So pull that one out the way. That's our first stitch. Keep our stitches nice and even. Remember to rotate your work as you go. And you can see my second stitch and taking up some of that fabric on the underside. And that just, it brings those two edges together. And as you can see, it's a really, really nice professional finish. Definitely worth doing. Not difficult to do when that glue is nice and dry. Don't mind my knots. There we go. You see that little binding happening there? That's going to continue on all the way around that nice little edge, and that's all you see when that little bear is standing up. So I'm going to go right the way around that little base disc. There we go. So that has my base nicely set in there. So now we can go ahead and add our little bear's eyes. Now I have chosen my eye position there, and you can see with this little one just exactly where that should be, and it's just tucked into those, you can see the little indent in the muzzle there, and they just sort of tuck in either side, and we will get a bit of pull in, so make sure that there's enough room for them to pull in and that it won't touch that muzzle piece. So once you've got your eye positions right, you can just use a couple of ball head pins to work that out. Now we're going to attach them. So I'm just using my normal little black buttons. So what I'm going to do is I've got my doubled extra strong thread on my doll needle, and I've got it quite long, and I'm going to enter at the back of the head just somewhere about in the center, and I'm going to come out right next to that little eye spot that I've made. I can take a few goes to get it exactly right. Because it's a 2-hole button, you want to be just one side of it, and pull that one all the way through. Leave your tail ends hanging, and we go through our button and back through the front of our button, And then we're going to go back into our little bear's head, just the other side. So we're not travelling the same path. Now we're going to flip him over, and where we want to come out with our needle is out of the same hole that we entered. To make that a bit easier, you can take your awl and you can increase that hole just a little. We're parting the fibres of the fabric, we're not actually cutting it. We would never snip it. And you'll find that your needle will find its way to that exact hole. You can see that's come through there. Pull that one all the way through. You want to check that those little eye threads aren't twisted. Pull on those both those threads, and you can see, just I'm giving it a little tug there, and you can see that that little eye is just being pulled in nicely. Now all I need to do is keep that tension up, tie my first knot and pull in, and I'm tying the knot into the stuffing. It's not tying on the back of the fabric, so it's not going to damage the fabric at all. So you need to tie that little eye in just a little bit tighter than you want it to actually sit, and then you will knot it off 3 or 4 times to hold that into place. And then you can re-thread your needle on your ends, dive back into that hole, come out anywhere and hide those thread ends actually into that little bear. So there we go, that has our little completed little mama bear. You can see my eyes are in position, and I've gone ahead and sewn those little ear buttons on right in the middle. Make sure that you've got space around them all the way, and you can see that's the bigger buttons and how they look. Choose whichever you like, and make sure that you can press those nice and tight when you're stitching them in. So she's all ready. We will do her little hand snaps, her little press studs when we've come to the end. So we can put her aside and we can start working on her little baby bear. Now, little baby is very tiny. Never been a huge fan of working really small, except when I'm sculpting. Even in my own work, I've never gone right down to miniature, but and probably my eyes are not what they used to be. Who am I kidding? Nothing is what it used to be. However, I have designed this little one, and it's so easy to make, and I've actually really enjoyed making these little tiny sleepy bears. So we start with our little body piece. Now you can see this little body section here. I've already gone ahead and stitched all the way around it. Now I've sewn that tiny little blanket stitch. So it's your standard blanket stitch, but it's really small. I tend to call it a buttonhole stitch when it's this small. And I'm using my extra strong thread as my embroidery thread, and do give that a go. Honestly, it makes the best little embroidery thread for this sort of work. And it does come in enough colours to give you enough choice, and the thread doesn't fatigue, so it stays nice and crisp right throughout, and of course it's super strong. So there's my little body piece. I've come in at the top and using a single strand, and I've hidden my knot at the front because our little head is going to be attached at the front, so that will cover that knot, and sewn that blanket stitch. I'm going to put a link up there to a video that shows you how to sew the blanket stitch. I've done a video on that for you, and it will show you in great detail. So now I'm just going to show you on the little arms that we're going to do exactly the same thing. So the little arms sit at that apex as well. And so we're going to hide the knot at the top again. So again, my single strand, and we're going to go in at the top and come out between those 2 layers there. I tend to wrap that around my finger, and I'm going to just be taking the tiniest stitches and coming out through the loop. So I've gone through both layers, keep my thread out of the way, and bring my needle out through the loop. And that's giving me that lovely little binding stitch, which is my favourite. Now the best part about working on this little bear is the little double felt means that it sews through like butter. It's lovely, and you're not worried about holding pieces together because they're beautifully joined. So it's really, you'd be surprised how quickly you can do it. I know that they look like very, very little stitches, and they are, but it's very hard to get it wrong. You can see that there. You find you can travel really quickly doing that little stitch, and I'm going to continue to work that stitch all the way around that outside edge, up the inside, and right back up to the top here. Once you have your little arms and your little body stitch, we've got that one already, we can pop that one aside and we can start working on our little head. Now I've gone ahead and just as we did with Mama Bear's face, where we pressed on that little front muzzle, we're doing exactly the same thing here. Now we're not turning this little head through, so we're going to be sewing all the way around, so make sure you leave room around and just press that one, and I'd say that's about 3 millimeters from the base. That just gives you enough room. Make sure it's nicely centered. So here with this one, I'm going to sew a tiny little blanket applique stitch. I'm using my cream thread, so I'm keeping mine coordinated as I have with this little baby here on that little face piece. But you can outline it if you like. It's very small, so be careful to keep your stitches really small. So we're going to sew that on in exactly the same way. It's just that your stitches are much smaller, and it's still my single thread of my extra strong Gutermann top stitching thread, and you can see it's barely a millimetre, that little stitch, making sure I'm catching some of that underneath felt. And again, have a look at my video on the blanket applique stitch, and you can see I'm just going to do exactly as I did before, and I'm going to make my way right around that little face shape. And there is my little face piece in place. You can see I have gone ahead there and I've added a little spot right in the center there where I want my little nose to be. So I just do that one little spot so that I can stitch over it on either side of it. And you can also see those tiny little marks I've put in. I'm just imitating Mama Bear's mouth in the same way, and I will stitch those. So I have rethreaded with my extra strong thread again, this time in black, and I'm simply going to, I've got it doubled for the nose. I'm just going to come in behind. I've got a little knot, and you can see just coming either side. Off that little nose, and I'm going to take my stitches across. So just the other side of that little mark. It will pull in slightly. You can make it wider or shorter, and I'll probably just do 3 little double stitches there, and then I will rethread my needle on a single strand and sew that little mouth line in with that same stitch that you'll remember that we did with Mama's little mouth there. We're just using the finer thread. So I'm going to go ahead and sew in those little facial features. That has my little nose and mouth stitched in there nicely. Now we just need to sew those 2 head pieces together. So I've rethread my needle again with my pink extra strong thread. I've got a knot in the end and it's a single strand. We're going to be sewing the same stitch that we did all the way around our little body pieces. I've come in just on the back section of the head, just below the curve, the start of that little ear, because I'm just going to hide my knot between the 2 layers there. So I'm going to put my little top layer on, and I'll just make my first stitch right in that little ear indentation there. So that's really settled there. So now I'm just going to stitch right the way around that little ear, around the bottom of the chin, right the way around that other ear, and we're going to stop here. We're going to leave this little top part of the head open because we're going to add a tiny little bit of filling. And once I've travelled all the way around to the other ear there, I leave my needle on because I'm going to be closing that, continue on and closing that little opening. But for now, I'm just going to add the tiniest bit of filling. I'll be using my tiny forceps, which are very handy. And just tucking that in there. And it really is just a small amount, because we're going to be stitching those little sleepy eyes in place. And we want something to pull it into, just to give it a little bit of depth. I know that these little bears are very tiny and you might think it's a lot of detail to worry about, but it all looks so sweet in the end. And I do really find them quite easy to manage, even though they're so small. So you can see I'm just packing that in there, holding it with my thumb. Tucking that all in, and I might even grab my felting needle, and I'm just going to tuck all those little fibres in. To keep those out of the way. You can see just enough in there to pad that little head out. And so now I'm going to just continue on and close up that little top opening. And so now I'm going to add my little sleepy eyes. Now you can see on this little one here how I've done that. It's just with a single thread of, again, my extra strong thread in black, and I have made my little corner inside eye marks. So this is where I'll start, and then I'll take my stitch down to pull in. So I've got a knot in the end. You just come in at the back of the head and start in your first position right on that mark, and just take your stitch over. Just drop it down a little and come back out at the back of the head again, and we just give that a little pull in. So you can see that's a little bit of a little sunken closed little eyelid there, if you can see that. And all I need to do is keep that tension up, flip that over, and I will sew just a little stay stitch that will keep that tension up. Then I'll dive into the head, come out the other side in that eye corner, and repeat the process and cast off at the back of the head. So I have my little bear head ready to attach to my little arms and body, and that is as simple as we just take a doubled extra strong thread in a matching colour, and we've got our little body piece, our little arm pieces, just line them up at the top there, and we're going to go in at the back, just one side at the back. We're going to travel through, leave our tail ends hanging, and then we're going to take a nice bite across the back of that head. Make sure it's nice and central. Travel through. And then we're going to dive back into those little arms. And come out next to our start point there. And pull that one through. Now I don't use a little button on this one. You could, but it's so very tiny, I don't think it needs it. And you can see I've just pulled that one in. So we've got our little bear's head that can move, his little arms can move, so we've got all that lovely mobility with very little effort. See that? So now I'm going to turn him over, and all I need to do is knock that one off 3 or 4 times and just snip those thread ends. So if you wanted to use a little button, like I often do with my little button heads, you could have passed through a little tiny button first, all the way through, take that bite of the head, back through the little button and tie off on the button. But that's entirely up to you. I think this little finish is perfectly neat enough if your colours are all coordinating. So now we have little baby bear all ready to be held by Mama, and we're just going to pop her in there and just check that out. So our final step is to add our little snaps, which will allow Mama Bear to open and close her very loving arms. So you can cross over either way, makes absolutely no difference, but I think I'm going to go for this way. So all you need to do is make a mark on the underside for the right position for your little press stud, and then for your receiving press stud on the other side. And when you're sewing those press studs on, just use your extra strong thread and make sure that you're only going through the first layer. You don't want to be sewing all the way through, because we don't want to see anything on this side of the little paw, and that's true of that one too. So I'm just going to make those little marks and sew my little press stud snaps in place, and she will be all done. So there we go, we've got our little Mama Bears all finished, and look, the gang's all joined them. So if you like the little kawaii patterns, and they are fabulous for nurseries and so on, have a look at my playlist and you'll see we've got the little owl, the little kitty, and the little very, very retro bunny. So I hope you've enjoyed making this one. Let's have a look and see. Let me just still baby for a minute. Let's just see how they look holding twins. So I think this will be super cute. Look at that. An absolute armful. That's adorable. I think I would make them with 2 in future, but I always did want twins. But isn't that fabulous? I think they make the best little nursery gift. So remember those for new mamas, new Mama Bears or expectant Mama Bears. And I think it's a great little gift. And if you do want to make them up for markets, you're most welcome to make and sell any of my patterns. You just can't sell the pattern itself, but and I'm sure you're going to do amazing things with them. I can't wait to see all of your different colours and so on. As I said, I've kept mine all very tonal, but you can make them just so bright and colourful. Also, we've got them holding little babies, but of course if you want to make it even simpler, they would make a great little Valentine's pattern if you just made them a little felt-filled heart. Would be lovely, that they could hang on to. So there's really no limit to what they can hold in those little snap button hands. So I certainly hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Well, thank you all for watching today. Hope you enjoyed making a little Mama Bear, or perhaps you're making a Papa Bear. A nice, quick and easy one for you all. Now, I'm enjoying your photos so much. I'm loving to see some of you are just absolute machines. You're just punching out so many of my little designs and doing it so well. I'm loving seeing these pictures. Now, I might get you, if you want any of your pictures shared with everybody on my Pinterest board, which is made just for you, and it's called You Made It Because You Did, then perhaps if you follow me on Pinterest, you can then send me those pictures directly and I can pin them straight from there. It's probably a lot easier. I worry so much about, sometimes Instagram doesn't let me share your pictures. So if you've sent me pictures and haven't seen them on my Pinterest board, just send them to me in Pinterest and we'll be right as rain. So, but keep talking to me on Instagram. Come and visit me on Instagram, and it's lovely to hear from you. And also, ask me any questions. You can talk to me via Instagram and ask me technical questions and anything that you're having problems with your work. stitching and so on, and I can definitely help you out there. I love to hear from you all. I appreciate all of your support, and would love to see more people subscribe so that they don't miss all of the upcoming patterns, and there are so many coming. I'm also looking at, in the future, putting together, tell me what you think, a Facebook, Pay It Forward Facebook community page where we really can interact and you can all talk to each other and we can all share our projects together. So just on a daily basis, it can really encourage us all. So let's keep it all positive. Thank you all for all of your support, and make sure everybody, all of those good things that come to you, make sure that you share them, make sure that you pay them forward. And until next time, it's Huru from me.